So the outline of what I wanted to cover was allergies, are they increasing and why? What they are, and just look in more detail at ASCIA allergy management plans, which are new in the last 5 to 10 years that have made a significant difference, both in terms of safety and also in education. And natural histories of allergies, and if we've got time, a bit on risk reduction, and then just listing places for support. Okay, so 10% they are increasing. I think we all know that. 10% of 1-year-olds have proven food allergies on a food challenge. 20% have positive tests. So this was in a large, like our Plunkett group, study of thousands of children, 5,000 children, I think, or 3,000 children in Melbourne in 2010. And there's similar rates in New Zealand. The rate has more than doubled in the past 10 years, and that's worldwide in Western countries. Rates of admission for anaphylaxis have increased 4 times between 1995 and 2005. This is from an Australian study. There's an unpublished New Zealand study that reflects this as well. Allergies are more commonly multiple and severe, and allergy clinics are overflowing and specialists are scarce. So in New Zealand we have 9 immunologists who see children for allergies. So a large part of the burden is from general paediatricians and general practitioners. So why? The hygiene hypothesis has been the most popular over the last 10, 20 years. So decreased exposure in particular to bacteria and parasitic infections fails to educate the immune system adequately. And so the immune system then starts to try and fight common everyday substances such as food. Diet. Is it increased manufactured foods or decreased fibre? They're the 2 main contenders. And we'll hear more about short-chain fatty acids over the next 5 years, I think. They may have a protective effect. So decreased fibre has decreased these. Altered gut flora. So less gut flora produce less short-chain fatty acids. So that's the emerging theory. There's also a very clear hereditary component. You're much more likely to get any of the allergic spectrum if you have parents who have food allergies, asthma, eczema and hay fever, and it's not specific. So if you have a parent who has nut allergy, it doesn't mean you're more likely to get nut allergy, it's just you're more likely to get any one of those. So what it is when the immune system in someone with allergies makes antibodies to harmless substances such as food and pollen. These antibodies are all over mast cells, and I'll show you a picture of them in a bit. And these mast cells are on the skin, airways and blood vessels, and their location is quite important. When a person comes in contact with an allergen, the mast cells release histamine and other chemicals which cause the allergic symptoms. So this is mast cell, and this is them releasing their chemicals. So you can kind of get a good idea of why you tend to get a lot of swelling. So the common ones, the most common would be the environmental allergens down the bottom, so the pollen, pet dander and dust mite. Food allergies, they're the most common, the 9 most common there. Stinging insects, medicines and herbal remedies, and latex. What's anaphylaxis? So anaphylaxis is not nearly as common as allergies. There's a lifetime prevalence of 1 to 2%, but it's increasing. So it's a serious allergic reaction that's rapid in onset and can be life-threatening, so that's the definition. In a nutshell, it involves either the respiratory or the cardiovascular systems, and it can involve the gut or the skin. 10 to 20% don't involve the skin, so if someone doesn't have hives, it doesn't mean they haven't had anaphylaxis. It's much more likely if you've got asthma. So there's 5 to 8 times increased chance of getting anaphylaxis with food allergy if you have a concurrent asthma. Nuts are the most common cause of fatal anaphylaxis. 90% of anaphylaxis occurs in preschoolers, but death's rare in this age group, both because of their much better physiology, newer physiology, hasn't been damaged yet, and also because you've got people around all the time, so you've got that level of supervision and you don't have the risk-taking behaviour that you have in teenagers. So this is allergy action plans, which is have been developed by ASCIA. So ASCIA and Allergy New Zealand are different. So Allergy New Zealand's for patients, and it's education, support and information. There's a medical panel behind it, which is the 9 specialists, immunologists who are interested in allergy, and they vet everything that's on the website and send out and do all of that. They provide a lot of that. ASCIA is the Australian and New Zealand Clinical Immunology and Allergy Society, so that's all the specialists. So they get together with all the special interest groups and come up with plans like this. So we'll go through some more details. This is mild to moderate signs. So hives and swelling, which can be localised or generalised. So the top of the plan goes through what the signs are, which I won't go in detail, and then it has the particular action that you've got to do. So the medications is usually an antihistamine. And always watch for signs of anaphylaxis. So in young children, they're usually pale and floppy, difficulty breathing. So these are the top 5 of the signs of anaphylaxis relate to the breathing, and the bottom 2 are when you get cardiovascular signs. And the action for that is lay the person flat, don't stand or walk. There have been deaths associated with people who've got up to walk to the ambulance after being given their adrenaline, and then they've had the lost blood pressure and died. So always keep them flat. Give the auto-injector, phone the ambulance, and then contact the family. If they've still got the allergen all over them, it's also a really good idea to wash it off or wipe it off. It's on their hands. Okay, so that's a summary of that. There's also action plans for people who don't have anaphylaxis, so it's quite useful for anybody who's got an allergy to have one of these, so that if they do develop anaphylaxis, then they know what it is and what to do. It's surprising how many people that actually have had anaphylaxis that did not recognise it, because it varies, but about 60% of the time if you have anaphylaxis, you can, or even more probably, you can get better without treatment. However, deaths are much more likely if you don't have the adrenaline, so it's advised to give adrenaline within 5 minutes. So natural history, usually start with eczema and food allergies, and then asthma and allergic rhinitis often develop. It used to be thought that this mainly occurred in primary school age, but it's becoming much, much younger. So my kids both got their asthma and allergic rhinitis when they were 2. And my daughter had her eczema that needed wet wrapping for her first 2 years. And anaphylaxis at 2 too. So most children with milk, egg and wheat allergies will grow out of them, and that's often by age 5 or 10. Nut, seed, fish and shellfish allergies tend to persist. Environmental allergies tend to persist and increase. Immunotherapy can cure or improve these and may prevent new sensitisations. So oral immunotherapies come into play in the last 5 to 6 years, and it's being used extensively in Europe. The oral air and oral grass immunotherapy was approved by Pharmac at the beginning of last year, and so that's being used now, and it can be used in children from 5 years old, and so it's not subsidised. It costs about $100 a month, and you use it for 6 months of a year, 3 years in a row. But that's something that provides really good relief and can prevent new sensitisations, so you can prevent further allergies from developing. Risk reduction. So early oral exposure may help with prevention. Multiple large studies are in progress worldwide. Also, to reduce risks for children, you need a progressive letting go and handing over responsibility, in particular in primary school age, so that by the time they're teenagers, they've actually got a lot of practice of ordering things when they're out, of what all the different foods look like, of what to say to their friends when their friends might say, you can't have this, and things like that. And also they're teaching resilience skills. However, the cornerstone of risk reduction in schools and early childhood centres in particular is prevention of exposure to known allergens. Have we got time or not to look at some of those?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. So the main one is washing and drying your hands before and after food, and that's much better way to prevent exposure than banning. And that's certainly what is pushed for. Supervised eating times designated food areas, food sharing, wiping tables before and after food, and the food allergic, usually child, we're talking mainly about early childhood education in schools here, eats only food from their own labelled lunchbox and drink bottle. That's when the parents aren't there. Obviously you're going to be trying to teach them to be safely negotiate the world when the parents are there. In some situations, food restrictions can be needed, and that's mainly in early childhood centres. If a child has had anaphylaxis to small amounts of that food, most commonly nuts, and that should only be if the treating specialist recommends it. It slips through anyway, and there's an enormous backlash from communities where bans have been in place, in particular where there's been multiple food bans, and it's it becomes much more difficult. So I've been involved with some wider kindy communities where there have been issues with the communities. I've done talks to the community and trying to come to a solution. Okay, art supplies may need to be reviewed and shared cooking. So engaging the wider community, in particular advantages of hand washing in terms of germ and illness reduction. So the previous sport coordinator of Wellington had a young child with severe multiple anaphylaxis, and when she started school, they did a lot of work around education around hand washing, and it was the year of the flu epidemic about 3 or 4 years ago, and their class of year ones had none of them got the flu, whereas for the rest of the school it was about 40% of them were off with the flu, so it has clear things. Also helping classmates understand the allergy and how they can support their friend teaches tolerance, empathy, and reduces bullying. So spending enough time on it but not too much that it becomes too much of a focus. Okay, there's e-training on Askia for anybody in the community, so you can log on and spend an hour completely updating yourself or anybody who wants to on allergic symptoms with lots of different pictures and photos and what to do about it.